In this episode of Chaos and Chemistry, we explore the sneaky way that victimhood shows up, the negative impact it has on your relationships, and offer tangible ways to break your patterns, rescuing others while keeping your value. Welcome to Chaos and Chemistry, a podcast focused on having all the chemistry and feel-good you desire without the chaos and toxicity. My name is Legan. I'm a former counselor turned coach, and I'm here with my friend and co-host Max.
Hey guys, I'm Max. I'm a relationship and trauma coach working with people to improve their lives and become a better version of themselves.
Mm-hmm. I love our topic today, Max.
I do love it too. I'm not rescuing anybody, Legan. I'm saying it right off the bat. I'll let people burn. They have their own karma to figure out. They have their own journey in life. I'm not here to fix anybody. All I'm here to do is try to fix myself and try to love people a little bit, but that's it. That's all I'm saying right off the bat, Legan. Trying to lay down the law on rescuing. I'm not doing it anymore. Over this.
Yeah, it's like you're like giving yourself a pep talk in the mirror every day.
I literally say that to myself every day in the shower. I'm not rescuing more, Mom. Stop.
Well, I would say I'm in recovery. I'm in rescue recovery. It still is hard sometimes. I still notice that sometimes it is a struggle. But what helps me really get out of it is our topic today. It's really getting to the root of it, because once you see the dark side of it, once you see how actually destructive it is, you don't look at it as rescuing anymore. You look at it as destructive. Yeah. I'm being destructive rather than I'm rescuing, because rescuing comes with this positive connotation. You're doing something good. So you're helping the relationship. That's what you think. I'm helping this person. I'm helping the relationship. And that is a positive thing. But as we'll get into today, there is this other side to it that is very destructive and hurts and harms. So rescuing can be a very toxic behavior inside relationships.
Amen.
Mm-hmm. So why does it matter? Why is it important that we talk about it today? What do you think? It
matters because if we're trying to solve other people's problems by supporting, counseling, helping others at the expense of ourselves, it actually impedes us from developing into a real person, and keeps us always externally focused. And in that external focus, they call it external focus of control, you totally abandon yourself. And in that abandonment, the soul is not happy with you abandoning itself. So you will inevitably, and your ego isn't either, so it gets very resentful. People that help people are perpetually people-pleasing, become very resentful, because nobody can ever fill the void within you. So as a rescuer, you may be goody two-shoes, but deep inside, that void lives on, and you just get so angry. And you're always triggered. You're always hypersensitive. You're very difficult to be around. I was very difficult, believe it or not, Legan. Very difficult to be around in that state, because that state is exhausting, and I was suffering myself and causing suffering to others around you. So yeah, you definitely don't want any part of this. If you find it within yourself, it's time to do the work.
Yes. And it's really unfair to the people around you, because they can never reciprocate. And so because you need to be the giver all the time, you really have probably a dysfunctional relationship with receiving. And so other people can't give to you. So I always look back on my friendships and my relationships and think, I really was doing a disservice to myself and the amazing people in my life, because that gets kind of old. You just feel like you can never match the other person. It's like, so why try? I can never give as much as this person is giving. So why try? I mean, I remember feeling guilty and uncomfortable around having a baby shower. When we adopted Richa, I felt so guilty that my friends were going to throw me a adoption shower.
Right.
And talking about it in therapy, that's how uncomfortable most rescuers are with receiving. And so it's just like this neurotic need to be the giver, AKA be in control.
Yeah.
And save everyone around you without looking at your deeper motivations, discomforts, where it's coming from, etc.
Yeah, if you don't, if you nailed it, Legan. If you're always externally and you can't receive anything, ironically, receiving love, being able to be humble enough to receive love, and surrendered enough to receive love, and relaxed enough to receive love, is exactly what would fill the void. But the rescuer, because their neurotic need to please, is always blocking that off, so the void never gets filled with actual love back. They can't receive it. As soon as it comes, it makes them uncomfortable. They reject, and the void continues. So it is a fool's game. You will never solve it with the standard way of fixing things. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
What are, for our fellow listeners, what are the attributes of a rescuer? How do I know if I'm a rescuer or not?
You are overgiving most of the time. So
Right.
You're doing things without being asked. You're giving without being asked. You're assuming that everyone needs your help. You feel probably uncomfortable or suffocated easily, maybe by other people's attention giving to you. So you are over giving most of the time, and you also probably feel discomfort around receiving. So that's one way. I think what you mentioned earlier about that hyperreactivity, kind of always feeling like a pressure cooker. You have this perfect, I do everything for everyone persona, but underneath it all, you just feel like a bottle about to pop. Yeah. Poor boundaries. So you have a really hard time saying no. When you say no, you feel guilty, which we will talk about later, because guilt and shame often get confused. But you feel shame when you say no. You feel shame when you set boundaries and you don't rescue. So there's a hypervigilance of everyone around you, and you're trying to manage people's moods all the time, make everybody happy, and that has become your identity. So without rescuing, you really don't know who you are. And that's a question you can ask yourself if you're listening. If I'm not doing for others, who am I?
Yeah, I think that's the crux of the issue. Because the rescuer, as a child, and we'll get into how the rescuer got created just shortly, but because the rescuer had to start rescuing at such a young age, they abandoned their own self-development. And they don't really know who they are, because they only know themselves as a reflection of what other people think of them. But the real healed person is only truly in himself, and has done the work to individuate, to disconnect from everything, and find who they actually are, apart from everybody else. They're like a rock in the ground. They know exactly who they are, but the rescuer has never gone through that process. So they're always externally kind of floating around without actually knowing who they are, without a strong identity, without individualization. When you don't have a strong identity, you will get manipulated. You will manipulate others. You'll be in a very bad place.
What do you mean by strong identity? Because as a former rescuer, as someone in recovery, I would have thought that I had a strong identity, right? I seemed confident. I was very action oriented. I was an action taker. And so you've got confidence, you're an action taker, you're a high achiever. So you think you have a strong identity. Yeah. When you say individuate and create an identity, what does that mean? Because a lot of people that are rescuers, like myself, they think the rescuing role is their identity. They think the confidence is their identity. They think the action taking and the high achieving is their identity.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say you can't have an identity based on a coping mechanism. That's just impossible.
Yeah.
Because it's fake. It was taught to you. You learned it, and you've adapted a coping mechanism and made it your identity. No coping mechanism can be your identity. Your identity has to be free of all coping mechanisms, all defense mechanisms, all mental activity. Your identity lies in your heart. And you can't find your heart or your true passions, right, in a coping mechanism that keeps you in your head stuck thinking about other people and what they have to do. So in abandoning yourself, you abandon actually knowing yourself. And you take all the energy that would have been used to identify who you are and do the things you love, and you've given it to other people. And then you become frustrated because they can't fill the void, because you put them in an impossible bind of having to reciprocate all this stuff all the time back to you, where you're not ready to receive it. So you're never content. You're actually always discontent. The rescuer is always discontent because it's impossible for anyone to actually fulfill them,
Right. Nobody, you're always giving so much, no one can ever give enough back to you. So most rescuers feel taken for granted. They feel like they give more than other people do, which they set that up. So it's this perpetual self-fulfilling prophecy of no one cares about me. I don't matter. No one gives to me. I'm exhausted. I have to do everything. When none of that is actually true, you're just creating it by your need to overfunction as a way to feel valuable and safe in relationships.
Oof. When I stopped doing that, you know what happened, Legan? This is really a mind blower, but the world kept going. People didn't die. People didn't stop functioning. So we survived it. We survived COVID, and we survived Max's breaking away from fixing people. Believe it or not, I found that people were resilient, and it had just been all my delusion, and it was a beautiful delusion to break out of, because it brought back all my energy. It gave me back who I was, but it was a tough one to break. I mean, to get to that state is difficult because it's so enticing, right? Help people, love people. I'm just doing the best for you. It has like this really persona that is total bullshit, but until you see through it, you might be fooled.
Self-importance.
Yeah.
Right?
It's ego.
I'm so important that I need to do all this for everyone because no one else can handle themselves or take care of their problems or whatever. So you got this inflated sense of self on your end, and then you're seeing the world as not enough, victims, rescuers need victims. So every single person you see,
you'll turn them into a victim. If they don't need rescue, you'll find something to rescue them about. Yes. It's like the drama triangle, which we'll talk about some other time, but there's a rescuer, there's a persecutor, and there's a victim, and all three of them are messed up. They're all messed up because if you just have a persecutor and a victim, they can just fight between themselves. It's not a lot of drama. It's like, oh, you're a dork. You're okay, dork. Yeah, whatever. But then once a rescuer comes in and tries to save the victim and then starts fighting the other one, it totally becomes a shit show. So the rescuer has to identify that they are part of the problem. They are the problem. If they break out of it, they save themselves and save everybody else around them.
Yes.
But it is a hard realization, for sure.
Well, it's very deflating when you've believed you were so important. I mean, I know people that stay in marriages because they just don't think their ex-husband or their husband will be able to survive without them. And in 3 months, I mean, he's got a new wife or a girlfriend and someone to drive the kids around, and he's doing just fine. And so, but it's this story we tell ourselves that we are just so important that people can't survive without us. And it's not true. It's not true. And so to look at yourself and go, okay, this isn't working for me really, and it's really not working for other people because it's just keeping them disempowered, then you can step out of it. But it takes courage, because if that has been your identity for so long, there will be some space in recovery. When you start breaking these patterns, there will be some space, and in that space is where you get to discover who you are. Who you are without the overgiving and the overdoing and the self-abandoning and all that.
Who you are, the person who's able to receive back love and is able to it takes a lot of humility to receive back love. It's a whole different part of yourself that you may not even be aware you have, and it's a really beautiful part of not doing, of resting, of allowing people to do for you. And it's going to be very, very uncomfortable at the beginning because you've never done that. The rescuer is always putting out energy, right? They're always exerting energy, exhausting themselves to physical illness, all these things, right? Because they're always in this energy that's always out, right? But healed energy is in the East, it's called yin. You're just totally surrendered. You let go. You're allowing. Things come into your life. They love you. They leave. Whatever it is, you're just always not exerting energy. You're just in surrender, right? But the codependent, people pleaser, rescuer is always exerting force. They're always in their ego. Fight, 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 fight. You're not giving me enough. So the energy is just totally wrong. Once you start receiving and allowing, surrendering, you move into a whole different paradigm of life. And that's a very healing thing, because in that surrender, you get your energy back. You start using the energy to individuate. You start using the energy to find who you are. You start using the energy to really love people unconditionally. So it's a total transformation of the spirit to heal the wounds of rescuing and codependency.
Yes. I told you this when we were talking about today's episode, but I had a client, such a wonderful hearted individual, but she had been rescuing for years and years. She was like in her 60s. And through our work together, she found the courage to start setting boundaries, stop over functioning. And in the space, she found this passion and desire to create art. And she created a business. And she was like a retired teacher, was kind of in this chapter of life of not really knowing what was next for her. And she started a very successful business creating art. And it was amazing. And we would just laugh. And I'd be like, see what you can create when you start. And really, when you start focusing on yourself. And then what happens is you're still loving people. You're just loving them in a way that is intrinsic. It's not you're not creating art so that you can get validation. You're creating it because it's an intrinsic expression of who you are, your identity. So it's a totally different motivation. And if you're in relationships and you're always trying to get by all you're doing, that really impacts the way you see relationships, the way you see yourself, and the way you view the world. So, Max, what would you say is the dark side? I mean, we've talked a little bit about it, but what would you say is the dark side of rescuing? Because people that are rescuers are not inherently bad.
They're not.
They love people and they love giving to people. I mean, they're like, they mean so well. Yeah. But I think it's important for them to see how it hurts, because most rescuers don't want to hurt. Right. They're very motivated by that. They don't want to hurt anyone. And to know they're doing so is really motivating. So I think this piece is important today.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Legan. A lot of empaths fall into this trap. There's so many traps. This is one of the traps, because you do have a lot of love people, and you do see people, the better version of themselves, that they could just get over this part. If someone could just help them understand something, like you want to see the best in people, and it comes from a good place, but it can easily get distorted, and it can easily be you can really hurt yourself. So I would say the dark side is the manipulation nonstop. You are manipulating your partner. Anything that's done with strings attached to fill a void for you, or you're expecting them to give you back validation, is a manipulated technique. It is not done out of love. Love, the only form of love that there actually exists, that actually will feel good to your spirit, is unconditional love, because that's the only type of love that exists. Anything else, you're just a contract. I'll scratch your back if you mow the lawn. That is not love. That's a business contract. So by manipulating them nonstop to do things, you are putting them in a fake form of love, which your soul is going to reject and create misery for yourself. So stop the manipulation. Nonstop manipulation is the dark side. Constant vigilance on your partner. Anxiously attached people, this is a big one, because they're often anxiously attached because they've been rescuing their parent their whole lives. And that puts them in hypervigilance. Again, the energy is going outwards. You're not bringing the energy back, so you're always exhausted. And then the weaponized love, which I just talked about. What other attributes do you think, Legan?
I think you covered everything. I mean, really, the most harm is done on ourselves. But when you said that in relationships where someone rescuing, it's transactional love. Right. I refer to it as it's an arrangement. And so most people that are in these codependent relationships where they're giving, maybe getting a breadcrumb here and there, they really don't feel loved in the relationship. They feel empty. They feel like it's this arrangement. Yeah. I do this, he does this, I do this, he does this. And so there's no intimacy there. And intimacy is something that you have with friends, you have it with coworkers. It's not just something that you experience in romantic relationships. So that to me is the saddest part, is that these people that are well-intentioned are really missing out on how love feels. And so they're not experiencing real love within themselves, and they're not really experiencing love in the relationships. They're experiencing an arrangement that they tell themselves is love, but it's not the feeling that they've desired since they were probably a child. So it's just kind of settling for this version of love that doesn't feel like love. And it doesn't feel like love because it's not.
It's unloving.
So, you know, sometimes we're like, oh, I don't feel, this relationship feels empty, or it doesn't feel loving.
Because it is.
Well, you're onto something. Yeah. Like, you know, and then we like gaslight ourselves, and we're like, no, but, you know, he loves me, and we do this, or we go on trips, or we do that. Well, all of that is good and well, but if you don't have self-love enough to let go and be and allow and receive, it doesn't matter. You can have all the wonderful attributes of a relationship. You're never going to feel it.
Yeah. You can only give to people what you found within yourself. So if you can't love yourself unconditionally for who you are, without doing a bunch of stuff, without having to do all these acclimates and career, if you can't accept yourself as 100% lovable for no reason at all, you're not going to be able to love people unconditionally. So that's the work you have to do to figure out what love does. And until you figure that out, your soul will reject it. It will not feel fun because the soul knows what love is. Your traumatized coping mechanism is not love. So you're going to, if you stay at that level of superficiality, you are going to feel void. So you have to do the work. So Legan, how do we start turning this around? How do we start stopping these behaviors now that we've identified them as part of our psyche?
Realize that acts of service, which is what most rescuers really depend on as their main form of love, like love language. I'm sure if you're listening, you've heard of the love languages. I mean, you'd have to be living under a rock to not, but if you haven't, you can Google it real quick. But we all have different ways that we express love, and it's to look at, how do I express love, and where is it out of balance? So everybody thinks, oh, I have this love language. Oh, I have this love language. This is my love language. I hear it all the time. As an infant, you did not come into the world with one way to express love.
Right.
So that means that your love language is a coping mechanism. It is not an innate expression of your humanness. And that's, so one way for most rescuers to show love is rescuing. What other ways could you love people? How else could you love people? And sit with it. You know, what else could you do to love others that doesn't involve rescuing? Maybe it's hugging. Maybe it's allowing silence. Maybe it's giving people space. Maybe it's just shooting someone a text and being like, hey, thinking of you, sending you lots of love. You know, when we're rescuing, none of these ways of love are enough. They're not enough, right? So we're always like shooting for the stars and lassoing the moon for people, and we're missing out on what people really need most of the time, which is just reassurance, someone to listen, just being there. So I would first look at whatever you've determined your love language is. I'm sure you have. Most everybody has. And then look at what are other ways. Start opening up. What other ways could I practice loving? What do you think?
Do less. I really had to white knuckle it, to be honest. My propensity to fix people, to be in their lives, was really, really powerful. I mean, this is a tough one to break. It took me years. And a lot of it had to do with becoming aware of it, white knuckling it through, saying, no, I will not do this. Even though I can and I want to, I'm not going to do it because I have to break this pattern within myself. And I have to be willing just to allow things to go to hell, let the boat sink if necessary, and be okay watching that happen. Because people, you don't really know what is right for people. You think, your ego thinks it knows, but you don't know if their soul has to go through that misery to like wake up. So if you take away their misery, you take away their opportunity to heal, and they just stay stuck in this perpetual numbness with your coping mechanism and their coping mechanism. So what you think is right for them can be totally the wrong thing for them. You actually don't know what's right for them. You have to let them explore the space and figure it out, and it might be a total tragedy. They might be unemployed. They might lose everything. They might be, whatever you think is the worst case scenario, that might be exactly what their soul requires for them. And that was on their path. And here you are saving them from them, giving them more money all the time, at your expense, and you're not allowing their soul to go through that process. And that could have been what really healed them. But here you are blocking God's will. So I recognize that, hey, I don't even know what's right anymore. I don't know what's right for me, let alone someone else. So once that realization hit me, I was like, oh shit, here I am thinking I know stuff. I don't know anything. And they're just causing them to resent me eventually. What am I doing? So do less is the thing I started doing, and get my ego off its reign, because I don't know what's good for them. I'm imagining based on my own ideas, but those are just my own ideas. And it takes humility to be like, let God's will be God's will for their lives, and let me get out of the way. Yeah.
Right. We don't know. Doing less, setting boundaries, saying no, it starts to create a separate identity from the people around you. And when you start telling the truth, when you start being honest, you can say, like you just said, you could say, I really want to, I have this urge to jump in, but I know I don't have the capacity for it right now. I know energetically I don't have the capacity, emotionally I don't have the capacity, and so I can't do it. Yeah. You can say all of that. Yeah. And then you start to create a stronger, more contained sense of self. So you start to feel more secure in a lot of these, in all of your relationships, without the other person changing.
That's right. Ironically, you stopping is what's going to help the relationship, because the old self wasn't love, as Legan so exactly said, it wasn't love, wasn't helping, was just creating resentment. So by you doing less, it may be in your mind, it's going to feel like you're losing everything, but you're actually gaining it. You're actually gaining a chance for love. You're actually gaining a chance for real connection. You're actually gaining a chance to learn who you are, rather than sticking your whole life in a trauma response coping mechanism that was just programmed into you as a 5-year-old. So don't live your life as a trauma response. So do less. Actually, healing, Legan. Healing, if I had to summarize it all, is doing less. The more healed the person gets, the less they do. In fact, the really, really healed people just sit in silence. They just radiate love so much that they don't have to do anything. So it's getting from like the neurotic, we talked about neurotic need to serve as a characteristic of this, which is always exerting their energy, exhausting themselves, getting sick, literally getting sick, to an early grave, right? To the healed mind, which is totally surrendered, let go, allowing, loving people exactly as they are, not wishing to change them, because the minute you think you can change them, you're not loving them anymore, and being at peace and surrendered and love in silence, and just loving in a beautiful way. It's the whole journey of life is to move from that neuroticness to the stillness and peace. And you're not going to do that by doing a lot of stuff. You're going to do that by removing things and stopping doing things that weren't helpful to love.
Yes. Well said.
Thank
Max.
you, Legan. Every now and then something comes out. Something good comes out.
Yeah, very, very well said. And the thing is it's hard. This is tough.
So hard.
It's tough. Yeah. And you're going to feel shame, in the guilt. A lot of clients call it guilt, but it's really just shame, because you're not doing something wrong. Guilt is, I'm going against my values. If you're not going against your values and you're just saying no because you don't have the time or capacity, then you're not doing something wrong. So that's not guilt, that's shame.
What I would say is that those are exactly what you want to experience. You're actually, the coping mechanism keeps you away from those deeper, darker, painful feelings. And you can just do, fix, and never feel the shame, never feel the pain that is lying underneath those coping mechanisms. It's a coping mechanism because you're shoving down feelings. When you stop doing, guess what? The feelings are going to come up. And that can be a lot of grieving. It can be very painful. That thing that you've been running away from, those feelings of low self-worth, you've literally structured your life around rescuing to avoid those feelings. So at the beginning, it's going to feel uncomfortable. All those feelings are going to be feeling painful. You have to have enough courage to sit with those feelings and embrace them and love them exactly. Whatever comes up, you love that as exactly what needs to come up. You love that part of yourself. And in doing so, you actually heal.
Yes.
Totally nailed it.
It's scary. It's scary and it's hard, but it's so worth it. And what I always find, people are always so scared. Clients are always so scared. They're scared to be selfish. So they're like, well, if I'm not rescuing everyone, the only other option is selfishness. it's like there's these two choices. There's these two boxes. You're either over functioning and digging yourself into an early grave, or you're the devil and you're selfish. You're a horrible person. And it's like, no, there's this gray area where you give from a place of generosity. You support and you help by in different ways, rather than just depending on these two extremes. And so what I always tell people is, at the beginning, you are going to feel like you're not doing anything. Everyone's mad at you. Everyone hates you. It's like all these, like this invisible audience in our head. When you stop rescuing, you are going to have this story that you're bad, everyone's mad at you, you're selfish, all these like fake things.
Narration,
so, yes. But what happens is the pendulum always kind of finds its balance. Right. And then you end up operating more from an authentic place of, some days I'm really helpful. Some days I can give a lot of support and advice and do those things. And then other days I don't, because I don't have the capacity for it. So the difference is, it's not that you become a completely different person. It's that you are motivated by intrinsic love for yourself and others, rather than fear of not being worthy, not being valued, or being abandoned. Because when you're operating from fear like that, you're just using people. Nobody wants to see it. Nobody wants to see the truth. But if you're a rescuer, you're really just using people so that you can feel like you're a good person. And I always tell clients, I'm like, ask yourself the question: if you knew you were an amazing, lovable, worthy, valuable person, it was like you get a certificate, right? It's like set in stone. Everyone on the whole planet knows it. Would you do that thing?
Yeah.
And if the answer is no, there you go. Don't do it. And you just sit with it. You just sit with feeling horrible. And then watch and see how the world does not end.
It does not. It's a tough one. I think you said it wonderfully, Legan. It's going to take time. It took years for me. It's one of the hardest dominoes to break, and you have to do baby steps little by little. It's not black and white. You don't go from like non-individuated to individuated from one day. It's baby steps, little by little, doing a little less. Maybe, not picking up the socks this morning, letting the world fall apart for the socks. Whatever it is, let that world fall apart. And then your brain has to realize, you know what, the world didn't end. You know what, life went on. And it's only by seeing that, we can't tell you. It's only by you doing it and seeing that and feeling what that feels like, that the mind says, oh, when I didn't rescue that person, the sun still came up. And you can only know that by actually experiencing. So start little by little experiencing things, and then your mind will slowly start to shift. But it won't start to shift if you're not aware, if you haven't learned what needs to be learned, which you're learning now, and starting doing little behaviors that are going to transform yourself in time. It's going to take time.
Yes.
So, Legan, what are 3 takeaways? We're going to have music in this section, but for now, no music. So, ding, 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 ding. 3 key takeaways. Legan, what's your first takeaway?
Rescuing actually destroys.
Oof.
So you're destroying, you're not rescuing, you're lying to yourself. 2, you are so much more than an act of service. Your purpose in life is not solely just to rescue everyone from what you perceive to be problems. Your purpose, who you are, is more than that. And then 3, you can find a balance here. You can still be a caring, loving, giving person while being someone that gives from a place of love and intrinsic motivation, and not intransactional, manipulative motivation.
That is beautiful, Legan. I think that's the road to ultimate healing. What a wonderful journey. It's a journey you have to step into, and you have to have the courage to do it, because the feelings do come up. It is difficult. But I would not spend a day in my old self.
Oh,
this new self, I know, it's just the harm and wear and tear on the body, on the mind. it was just miserable. So do the work, because the benefit after you go through like the dark valley, right, and see all that pain that comes up and warmly greet it, it's rainbows and sunshine at the other end into really much more peaceful life.
Yes. And people might not understand it.
Right.
You know, people might not get it.
They're used to your old self.
Especially the people benefiting from all your fixing and rescuing. But everything takes time. And, you know, at the end of the day, it's important that you know your motivation. So people may not know why I'm not inserting myself in their life 24/7 anymore, but I do. I don't want to see people as victims. And that matters more to me than seeing myself as holier than thou rescuer. So you have to, what do you want? What do you want more? You want to see people as victims, or do you want to see, I don't want that.
And if this resonates with you, check us out on www.chaosandchemistry.com. And if you need help, book a discovery call with us. It's the first step towards finding lasting happiness.